Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight I'm going to read some Reddit stories that are wild, sad, funny, and somehow still relaxing at 2 a.m. So go ahead, get comfy, and lay back. Before we jump in, if you enjoy these late night story sessions, feel free to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. I read all of them, even the ones where you guys roast my Minecraft building skills. All right, let's get into the first story. This first story comes from someone asking if they're wrong for refusing to give up their wedding venue to their younger sister. It's about family pressure, boundaries, and what happens when someone else wants what you've already planned and paid for. I had been engaged for 18 months and had booked my dream venue 2 years in advance. It was a historic estate with gardens overlooking the ocean. The date was set for June of the following year. Deposits were paid. The photographer was booked. Invitations had been designed. Then my younger sister got engaged after dating her boyfriend for only 6 months. 3 weeks after the engagement, she announced she wanted a spring wedding. Specifically, she wanted to get married in April, just 2 months before my wedding. Here's where things got complicated. My sister fell in love with my venue. She toured it with our mom and apparently cried because it was so perfect. The problem was, the venue was completely booked for the next 2 years, except for my date. My sister called me crying, begging me to switch dates with her. She said April was more meaningful because that's when she and her fiancé first met. She promised she would take whatever date I gave up, even if it meant waiting another year. I said no. I'd been planning this for 18 months. I had chosen June specifically because it was my fiancé's late mother's birth month, and we wanted to honor her memory. Everything was booked and paid for. My sister showed up at my apartment the next day with our mom. They both sat me down and tried to convince me to be reasonable. My mom said that since my sister wanted to get married sooner, it made sense for me to let her have the earlier date. She said I was being selfish and that family should come first. I held firm. I explained that this wasn't just about a date. It was about honoring my future mother-in-law, about the deposits I had already paid, about the guests who had already requested time off work, about the entire vision I had spent more than a year building. My sister started crying harder. She said I was ruining her happiness. She said that if I really loved her, I would do this one thing for her. She accused me of always needing to be the center of attention, always needing to be first at everything. Our mom agreed. She brought up instances from our childhood where apparently I had overshadowed my sister. The time I won the science fair when my sister got honorable mention. The time I made varsity soccer as a freshman when my sister was still on junior varsity as a junior. The time I got into my first choice college when my sister had to go to her safety school. I tried to explain that none of those things were intentional. I had worked hard for my achievements, and I had never tried to diminish my sister's accomplishments. This wedding venue situation was completely different. I had booked first. I had planned first. I had paid first. The conversation ended with my sister storming out and my mom telling me I was being cruel and immature. She said that when I looked back on this, I would regret choosing a piece of property over my sister's happiness. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure intensified. Family members started calling me. My aunts told me I should be more flexible. My grandmother said that in her day, the younger sister would never have been so selfish. Even my dad, who usually stayed out of family drama, suggested that maybe I could consider postponing to keep the peace. My fiancé was furious on my behalf. He said we had every right to keep our date and our venue. He reminded me that his mother's memory was important to us, and we shouldn't have to compromise on something so meaningful. He offered to talk to my family, but I told him it would only make things worse. Then my sister went nuclear. She posted on social media about how her older sister was preventing her from having her dream wedding. She didn't name me directly, but everyone knew who she meant. The post got hundreds of comments from friends and distant relatives, most of them sympathizing with her. My phone exploded with messages. Some people supported me, but many more told me I was being unreasonable. They said weddings were just one day, and I could get married anywhere. They said my sister deserved to be happy, and I was standing in the way of that happiness. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe the venue didn't matter as much as I thought. Maybe I should just find somewhere else and let my sister have what she wanted. But then I talked to my best friend, who reminded me of something important. She said that if I gave in now, my sister would learn that throwing tantrums and applying family pressure would get her what she wanted. She said that my wedding was just as important as my sister's, and I had planned first. I decided to stand my ground. I called my mom and told her my decision was final. I was keeping my venue and my date. If my sister wanted that specific location, she would have to wait until it became available again, or she could choose somewhere else. My mom was silent for a long moment. Then she said that if I went through with this, I would be damaging my relationship with my sister permanently. She said my sister might not even come to my wedding. She asked me if a building was really worth losing my family over. I told her it wasn't about the building. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. It was about not being bullied into giving up something important because someone else wanted it more loudly. My mom hung up on me. 2 days later, my sister sent me a long text message. She apologized for the social media post and for some of the things she had said, but she still maintained that I should give her the venue. She said she understood I had planned first, but her timeline was more urgent because she and her fiancé wanted to start trying for kids right away, and they didn't want to wait. I didn't respond to that text. I didn't know what to say. The goalposts kept moving. First, it was about April being meaningful. Then, it was about her crying over the venue. Now, it was about starting a family. My fiancé and I went ahead with our plans. We confirmed everything with the venue. We sent out our saved the dates. We moved forward as if the drama wasn't happening. My sister found a different venue for her April wedding. It was beautiful, on a vineyard in the hills, with sunset views and string lights. She seemed happy with it based on the photos she posted. But she still wasn't speaking to me. The family remained divided. Some relatives said I had done the right thing by standing firm. Others said I had been stubborn and hurtful. The tension hung over every family gathering. My sister's wedding came and went. I wasn't invited. My parents went, of course, and so did most of our extended family. I saw the photos online. It looked beautiful. My sister looked happy. Part of me felt relieved that she had found something that worked. Another part of me felt sad that I hadn't been there. 2 months later, my own wedding arrived. My sister didn't come. My parents came, but they were cold and distant. They smiled for photos but left immediately after dinner. They didn't stay for the dancing or the sparkler send-off. The day itself was everything I had dreamed of. The venue was perfect. The weather cooperated. My fiancé's family cried during the ceremony when we lit a candle in memory of his mother. Everything went smoothly. But there was a hole in the day where my sister should have been. I'd imagined her standing beside me as a bridesmaid. I had imagined dancing with her at the reception. I had imagined her being part of this major moment in my life. Now, months after both weddings, my sister and I still aren't speaking. My parents remained cordial but distant. Family gatherings are awkward and tense. Some relatives have taken sides, and others just avoid the topic entirely. I sometimes wonder if I made the right choice. I got my dream wedding at my dream venue, on the date that mattered to me and my husband. But the cost was my relationship with my sister and the warmth I used to feel from my parents. My husband tells me I did nothing wrong. He says my sister created this situation by demanding something that wasn't hers to demand. He says my parents enabled her behavior by pressuring me instead of teaching her about boundaries and respect. But late at night, I still think about it. I think about whether a venue was really worth all of this. I think about whether I could have been more flexible, more understanding, more willing to compromise. I also think about what message I would have sent if I had given in, that my plans don't matter, that my boundaries can be crossed if someone cries hard enough, that I will always put myself last to keep the peace. I don't have a clear answer about whether I was wrong. What I do know is that I made a choice to honor my own plans and boundaries, and that choice came with consequences I'm still living with today. Let's move into the next story, where someone discovers their partner has been lying about something major for their entire relationship. This story is about a person who found out their partner of 5 years had been hiding a huge secret, and the aftermath of that discovery. It's about trust, deception, and whether some lies are too big to forgive. I had been with my boyfriend for 5 years. We lived together for 3 of those years. We talked about marriage, about buying a house, about starting a family. I thought I knew everything about him. Then one night, his phone rang while he was in the shower. The caller ID said Mom. I didn't think anything of it. I answered because I had a good relationship with his mother, or at least I thought I did. Except the woman on the other end of the line wasn't the woman I had met multiple times and called his mom. The voice was different, older, confused. She asked who I was. I told her I was her son's girlfriend. There was a long pause. Then she said she didn't know her son had a girlfriend. She said she hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. My stomach dropped. I asked her to hold on. My boyfriend came out of the bathroom, saw me holding his phone, and his face went completely white. The truth came out slowly, painfully, over the next several hours. The woman I had been calling his mother for 5 years was actually his aunt. His real mother lived across the country, and they had been estranged since he was in his early 20s. But it went deeper than that. His aunt wasn't just pretending to be his mom at family gatherings. She was part of an elaborate lie he had constructed about his entire family situation. He had told me his father died when he was young. The truth was, his father was alive and living in another state. They didn't speak, but not because of death. Because of a falling out my boyfriend had never explained. He had told me he was an only child. He had 2 siblings, a brother and a sister, both of whom I had never met, never even knew existed. He had told me about a childhood growing up in a small town, going to a specific school, having certain experiences. Some of that was true. Much of it was exaggerated or completely fabricated. I sat on our couch, listening to him explain, and I felt like the floor was disappearing beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about him was called into question. If he could lie about his family, about his parents, about siblings, what else had he lied about? He cried. He apologized. He said he had created this version of his life because the real version was too painful and complicated. He said his family was dysfunctional, and he wanted to leave that behind. He said he had meant to tell me the truth, but the longer he waited, the harder it became. He said his aunt had agreed to play along because she felt sorry for him. She loved him and wanted him to be happy, even if it meant participating in his deception. I asked him how he could look me in the eye every day for 5 years and maintain this lie, how he could let me develop a relationship with his aunt while thinking she was his mother, how he could talk about our future together while keeping this massive secret. He didn't have good answers. He just kept saying he was sorry, that he loved me, that he had made a terrible mistake. I told him I needed space. I went to stay with my best friend for a few days to process everything. During those days, I replayed our entire relationship in my mind. Every family gathering, every story he had told, every time I had comforted him about his dead father, or empathized with him about being an only child. It all felt tainted now, poisoned by dishonesty. My friends were divided. Some said I should leave him immediately, that this level of deception was unforgivable, that if he could lie about something this fundamental, I could never trust him again. Others said everyone has complicated family situations, that maybe he had handled it wrong, but his intentions weren't malicious, that 5 years of an otherwise good relationship shouldn't be thrown away over this. I didn't know what to think. Part of me understood that family trauma is real and complex, that maybe he had felt trapped by his initial lies and didn't know how to come clean, that maybe he really did love me and had made a terrible mistake out of shame or fear. But another part of me felt betrayed in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't just that he had lied, it was that he had let me build my life around false information. I had made decisions based on what I thought I knew about him. I had planned a future with someone who didn't really exist, at least not in the way I thought. After a week, I agreed to meet him and talk. He had written me a letter, pages long, explaining everything, his real childhood, his family dynamics, the reasons for the estrangement, the shame he felt about coming from what he saw as a broken home. He told me about his real mother, who struggled with addiction when he was growing up, about his father, who was emotionally abusive, about his siblings, who he had lost touch with after a series of conflicts and misunderstandings. He explained that when he met me, he was trying to reinvent himself, to be the person he wished he had been, to have the family background he wished he had. And his aunt, who had been more of a mother to him than his biological mother, had agreed to help him maintain that fiction. Reading his letter, I felt compassion for him. I understood that his childhood had been difficult, that he had trauma he was dealing with, that the lies came from a place of pain, not cruelty. But I also felt angry, because regardless of his reasons, he had made a choice every single day for 5 years to continue lying to me. He had looked at me across the breakfast table, across the pillow at night, across the couch during movies, and chosen deception over honesty. I told him I needed more time. He agreed. He moved some of his things out of our apartment and stayed with a friend, giving me space to figure out what I wanted. Over the next month, I went to therapy. My therapist helped me work through my feelings. She asked me important questions. Could I forgive him? Could I rebuild trust? Was this relationship worth the work it would take to repair? She also asked me to consider what forgiveness would look like. Would it mean staying together? Would it mean moving forward with conditions? Would it mean acknowledging the betrayal, but choosing to see the full, complicated person he was? I realized I didn't have clear answers. Some days, I wanted to forgive him and try to rebuild. Other days, I wanted to pack all his things and tell him to never contact me again. I also had to confront something uncomfortable about myself. Had there been signs I had ignored? Had I been so eager to have a stable, loving relationship that I hadn't asked harder questions? Had I seen what I wanted to see instead of paying attention to inconsistencies? Looking back, there had been small things, times when his stories didn't quite add up, moments when his aunt seemed uncomfortable or evasive, family photos that seemed oddly sparse. But I had explained all of those things away because I loved him and wanted to believe him. Finally, after 6 weeks apart, I told him my decision. I would give him a chance, but with conditions. He had to go to individual therapy to work on his issues with honesty and shame. We had to go to couples counseling together. He had to introduce me to his real family, not to repair those relationships necessarily, but so I could see the truth of where he came from. And most importantly, he had to understand that trust was broken and would take years to rebuild, that I might have moments of doubt and anger, that this wouldn't just go away because we decided to move forward. He agreed to everything. He started therapy the following week. We began couples counseling. He reached out to his mother, and eventually I spoke with her on the phone. It was awkward and painful, but it was real. The months that followed were hard, harder than I expected. Every time he told me something about his day or his past, I found myself questioning whether it was true. Every time he was late coming home or his phone rang, I wondered what else he might be hiding. Our counselor told us this was normal, that rebuilding trust after major deception takes time and conscious effort, that I would need to learn to trust again, and he would need to be consistently honest, even when the truth was uncomfortable. There were setbacks. Times when I got angry and brought up the lies again. Times when he got defensive because he felt like he could never move past his mistake. Times when we both wondered if we were fighting for something that was already too broken. But there were also moments of progress, times when he was honest about something difficult and I could see him making the effort. Times when I chose to believe him instead of doubting. Times when we talked openly about the hard stuff and came out feeling closer. It's been a year now since the truth came out. We're still together. We're still in therapy. The road ahead still feels uncertain sometimes. I can't say I've completely forgiven him. I don't know if complete forgiveness is possible for something like this, but I've made peace with the complexity of it, with the fact that he's both the person who lied to me and the person I fell in love with. That his trauma explains his behavior, but doesn't excuse it. We talk about marriage less now, not because I don't see a future with him, but because I need more time to feel secure in who he really is. He understands that. He doesn't push. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice by staying, if I'm settling for less than I deserve, if I'm being naive to think we can move past this. But other times, I see the work he's putting in, the effort to be honest, to be vulnerable, to show me all the messy, complicated parts of himself he tried to hide. And I think maybe that's what real love is. Not the fairy tale version where everything is perfect and easy, but the version where you see someone's worst mistakes and deepest flaws, and you choose to keep showing up anyway. I don't know how our story ends. I don't know if we'll make it long term, or if this betrayal will eventually become too much to carry. What I do know is that I'm trying. He's trying. And for now, that feels like enough. The next story takes us into workplace drama, where someone had to deal with a coworker who kept taking credit for their work. This one is about someone whose coworker repeatedly stole their ideas and presented them as her own, and how they finally got revenge in a very satisfying way. I worked at a marketing firm for 3 years. I was good at my job. I consistently came up with creative campaigns that performed well for our clients. My boss valued my input, and I was on track for a promotion. Then Sarah transferred to our department. Sarah was charming. She was good at office politics. She knew how to make the right people like her. She brought coffee for the executives. She volunteered for committee work. She made herself visible in all the right ways. At first, I didn't see her as a threat. I was focused on my work, and I assumed that quality would speak for itself. The first time it happened, I thought it was a misunderstanding. We were in a team meeting brainstorming ideas for a new client. I pitched a concept about using user-generated content in a unique way. Sarah nodded along, asked a few questions, and the meeting moved on. 2 days later, Sarah presented my idea to the client. Verbatim, she had created a full deck with mock-ups and strategy. She presented it as her own concept, and the client loved it. I found out when my boss congratulated her in front of the whole team. Everyone applauded. Sarah gave a little modest speech about how she was excited to bring fresh thinking to the department. I was stunned. I pulled her aside after the meeting and asked her what happened. She looked confused and said she didn't know what I meant. I reminded her that I had pitched that exact idea in our brainstorming session. She smiled and said that brainstorming was a collaborative process, that ideas built on each other, that she had taken the seed of a concept and developed it into something client-ready. She made it sound like I was being petty for expecting credit. I didn't push it further in that moment. I told myself maybe she was right. Maybe it was collaborative. Maybe I was being too sensitive about ownership. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Every time I shared an idea in a meeting, Sarah would take notes. Then within a few days, she would develop that idea further and present it as her own. She was strategic about it. She never stole ideas I had already fully developed and presented. She took the ones that were still in the early stages, the ones I had mentioned casually or thrown out during brainstorming. After the third time, I stopped sharing ideas in meetings when Sarah was present. I started being vague and non-committal. I kept my best concepts to myself until I could present them directly to clients or to my boss in private. Sarah noticed. She started finding other ways to get information. She would ask me questions in the break room about what I was working on. She would peek at my computer screen when she walked past my desk. She would befriend my assistant and casually ask what projects I was developing. I became paranoid. I started locking my computer every time I stepped away. I stopped leaving notes or drafts visible on my desk. I avoided discussing work in common areas, but Sarah was persistent. She started scheduling coffee chats with me, framing them as opportunities for us to collaborate and support each other. During these chats, she would ask probing questions about my creative process, about campaigns I was excited about strategies I was considering. I tried to be vague, but she was good at extracting information. She would relate to something I said, share her own supposed struggles, and make me feel like we were bonding. Then she would take whatever scraps of ideas I had let slip and run with them. The situation came to a head when we were both being considered for the same senior position. It was a promotion I had been working toward for over a year. I had seniority. I had a better track record. By all objective measures, I should have been the clear choice, but Sarah had been taking credit for my ideas for months. On paper, it looked like she was the creative powerhouse, like she was bringing innovation and fresh thinking. Meanwhile, I had become quiet in meetings, protective of my ideas, and less visible in the collaborative process. My boss called me in for a conversation about the promotion. He told me that while my work was solid, Sarah seemed to have more creative energy lately. He said she was really stepping up, taking initiative, bringing bold ideas to clients. I felt sick. Everything she had claimed as her initiative, as her bold ideas, had started with me, but I had no way to prove it, no paper trail, no witnesses who remembered the exact moment I had first suggested each concept. I decided I needed to set a trap. I started planning. I came up with an idea that was clever, unique, and perfectly suited for our biggest client. It was the kind of campaign that would definitely get executive attention, but I didn't pitch it. I didn't write it down. I just waited. Then I mentioned it to Sarah, casually, like I was thinking out loud. I was in the break room, and she walked in at exactly the moment I knew she would, because I had learned her routine. I pretended to be on the phone with a friend, talking about a campaign concept I was excited about. I described the idea in detail, the hook, the execution, the metrics we could track. I made it sound fully formed and brilliant. Then I hung up the phone and acted surprised to see Sarah there. She played it cool, asked who I was talking to, made small talk, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. I gave her exactly 4 days. I knew from experience that's how long it took her to develop a stolen idea into a presentable deck. During those 4 days, I went to my boss. I told him I had been developing a major campaign concept for our biggest client, and I wanted to present it to the executives. I requested a meeting for the following week. He agreed and scheduled it. Then I waited. Like clockwork, 3 days after our break room conversation, Sarah scheduled a meeting with the same executives. Her meeting was set for 2 days before mine. Perfect. Here's the thing about the idea I had planted. It was terrible. It sounded good on the surface, creative and bold and innovative, but it would never work in execution. It relied on a platform feature that didn't actually exist. It required a budget that was 3 times what the client had allocated. It targeted a demographic that had no overlap with the client's actual customer base. I had designed it specifically to fall apart under scrutiny. Sarah presented the idea to the executives. I heard later that the presentation itself went well. She was confident and polished. She sold the vision beautifully. Then the executives started asking questions. How would this integrate with existing systems? What was the projected ROI? How did this align with the client's stated goals? Sarah couldn't answer. She stumbled. She made vague promises about working out the details. She tried to redirect to the creative vision instead of the practical execution. The meeting ended badly. The executives thanked her for her time, but said the idea wasn't ready. They were concerned about her lack of preparation and her inability to think through basic logistics. 2 days later, I gave my presentation. IB pitched a completely different campaign, one that was actually good, one I had been genuinely developing for weeks, one with detailed execution plans, realistic budgets, and clear metrics. The executives loved it. They approved it immediately. They praised my thoroughness and strategic thinking. But I wasn't done. At the end of my presentation, I mentioned that I'd learned an important lesson recently about protecting my work. I said that in creative environments, it's easy for ideas to get shared and developed collaboratively, but it's important to maintain clear ownership. Then, I said something specific. I mentioned the failed concept Sarah had presented. I said, I had actually been the one to originally conceive that idea, but I had realized upon further development that it wasn't viable. I said I was glad I had caught the flaws before presenting it, and I was surprised to see it pitched anyway. The room got very quiet. One of the executives asked me to clarify. I stayed calm and professional. I explained that I had discussed the concept with Sarah a few days before her presentation, and I was concerned that there might have been confusion about whose idea it was. I didn't accuse her directly. I didn't need to. The executives were smart enough to connect the dots. They scheduled a meeting with both of us. Sarah denied everything, of course. She said she had come up with the idea independently. She said any similarity to our conversation was coincidental, but I had prepared for this. I had sent myself an email before my break room conversation with Sarah, documenting the idea in detail with a timestamp. I showed them the email. I walked them through the timeline. I explained that I had abandoned the concept after realizing its flaws, but I had kept the documentation. Sarah had no equivalent documentation. She couldn't explain how she had developed the idea. She couldn't produce any notes or early drafts. She had nothing except her word against mine, and a timestamp that showed I had written about the idea before she presented it. The executives asked her to leave the room. They told me they would be conducting a review of both of our recent projects. That review revealed the pattern. They went back through months of work and started asking questions. Whose idea was this originally? Who pitched this first? When did this concept first appear in meeting notes? Other team members were interviewed. Some of them admitted they had noticed Sarah taking credit for other people's ideas, but hadn't felt comfortable speaking up. A few people specifically remembered instances where I had mentioned concepts that Sarah later presented as her own. Sarah was not fired, but she was removed from consideration for the promotion. She was given a formal warning about professional conduct. She was reassigned to work on different accounts, away from my projects. I got the promotion. The office dynamics changed after that. People were more careful about documenting their ideas, more protective of their work. The culture of open brainstorming became a little less open, which was unfortunate but necessary. Sarah and I never spoke about what happened. She avoided me completely. She left the company 6 months later for a job at a smaller firm. Sometimes I think about whether I handled it the right way, whether I should have confronted her directly earlier, whether I should have gone to HR instead of setting a trap. But mostly, I feel satisfied. I protected my work. I got the recognition I deserved. And I taught Sarah a lesson about the consequences of stealing other people's ideas. The trap I set was manipulative, yes. But it was also the only way to prove what had been happening. Without concrete evidence, it would have been my word against hers. And she was better at office politics than I was. I don't regret it. In a professional environment, you have to protect your work and your reputation. Sometimes that means playing the game, even if you'd rather just focus on doing good work. Let's jump into a family story next, about someone whose mother-in-law wouldn't stop criticizing how they raised their children. This story is from someone dealing with a mother-in-law who constantly undermined their parenting choices, and the breaking point that finally changed everything. My mother-in-law, Linda, had opinions about everything: how I dressed my kids, what I fed them, how I disciplined them, what time they went to bed, what activities I enrolled them in. Every single choice I made as a parent was subject to her commentary and criticism. At first, I tried to be understanding. She had raised 3 kids of her own. She had experience. Maybe her advice was valuable. Maybe I should listen. But her advice wasn't offered kindly or respectfully. It came as criticism, as judgment, as endless comparisons to how she had done things, with the clear implication that her way was superior. When my daughter was a baby, Linda told me I was holding her too much, that I was going to spoil her, that babies need to learn independence. Never mind that my daughter was 3 months old. Never mind that every pediatrician and parenting resource I consulted said you cannot spoil a baby with affection. When I started introducing solid foods, Linda criticized every choice. Too early, too late, wrong foods, wrong order. She sent me articles from outdated parenting magazines. She told me stories about how she had done it better. When my son was born 2 years later, it got worse. Now she had 2 grandchildren to have opinions about, and she made sure to share those opinions at every opportunity. My husband, Her son was useless in defending me. He had been raised to never contradict his mother, to respect her, to value her wisdom. So whenever Linda criticized me, he would either stay silent or try to play peacemaker by suggesting that maybe we could try her way, just to see. This made me feel completely alone. I was being judged, constantly, and my partner wasn't standing up for me. He would tell me later, in private, that I was doing a good job, that his mom meant well, that I should just ignore her comments. But in the moment, when it mattered, he said nothing. Linda's visits became something I dreaded. She came over at least twice a week. Every visit included at least a dozen criticisms, wrapped up as helpful suggestions or innocent observations. She didn't like that I let my kids watch television. She didn't approve of the toys I bought. She thought my discipline was too lenient. She questioned my decisions about childcare, about school choices, about extracurricular activities, about everything. She also had a habit of undermining me directly with my children. If I said no to something, she would swoop in and say yes. If I told the kids they needed to eat their vegetables before dessert, she would sneak them cookies behind my back. If I set a bedtime, she would keep them up late when she babysat. I tried talking to my husband about it multiple times. I explained that I needed him to set boundaries with his mother, that her constant criticism was affecting my confidence as a parent, that her undermining my rules was confusing for the kids. He would nod and agree. He would say he understood, then nothing would change. Linda would continue her behavior, and he would continue to stay silent. Things came to a breaking point on my daughter's 5th birthday. We had planned a small party at our house, just family and a few of her friends from preschool. I had spent weeks planning. I had baked a cake myself, decorated the house, organized games, prepared food. Linda arrived early, before any guests. She took one look around and started critiquing. The decorations were too much. The cake looked dry. The food wasn't healthy enough. The games were too babyish for 5-year-olds. I took a deep breath and tried to brush it off. But then she started rearranging things, taking down decorations I had hung, moving furniture I had positioned specifically for the party flow, redoing the food table because she didn't like how I had arranged it. I asked her to stop. She ignored me. She said she was just helping. She said I clearly needed help because I hadn't thought things through properly. My husband watched this happen and said nothing. He was helping our son get dressed in his room, but I knew he could hear what was happening. He chose not to get involved. The final straw came when the birthday cake came out. I had made it myself, a rainbow cake with buttercream frosting. It wasn't professionally perfect, but it was made with love, and my daughter had been excited about it all week. Linda took one look at it and laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "Oh, honey, you really should have just bought one from the bakery." Then she turned to my daughter and said, "Grandma will get you a proper cake next year." I saw my daughter's face fall. She had watched me make that cake. She had helped mix the batter and lick the spoon. She'd been so proud that Mommy made her birthday cake. Something in me snapped. I told everyone the party was over. Parents who had just arrived were confused, but I didn't care. I thanked them for coming, handed them their goodie bags, and ushered them out. The party had lasted less than 30 minutes. Linda was shocked. She demanded to know what I was doing. I told her to leave. She refused. She said this was her granddaughter's birthday, and she had every right to be there. I told her she had criticized every aspect of the party, undermined my efforts, and hurt my daughter's feelings about the cake. I told her she was no longer welcome in my home. She turned to my husband, told him to control his wife, told him I was being ridiculous and emotional, told him to make me see reason. My husband looked between us. I could see him struggling. His mother, his wife. He had to choose. He chose her. He told me I was overreacting. He said she was just trying to help. He suggested we all calm down and continue the party. I told him that if he couldn't support me, he could leave with his mother. I told him I was done being disrespected in my own home. I told him I was done being made to feel like an inadequate parent. I was done with all of it. Linda left in a huff. My husband followed her out to apologize to her. My daughter was crying. My son was confused. The birthday party was ruined. I spent the rest of the day salvaging what I could. I called my daughter's best friend's mom and arranged a small play date with cake. Just the two girls, having fun, eating cake, playing games. No criticism, no tension. My daughter ended up having a good time. That night, my husband and I had the biggest fight of our marriage. He accused me of embarrassing him in front of his mother, of ruining his daughter's birthday with my drama, of being unable to take constructive criticism. I told him his mother's behavior wasn't constructive criticism. It was constant demeaning commentary. I told him that by never defending me, he was choosing his mother over his wife and children. I told him I couldn't continue living like this. We barely spoke for 3 days. Linda called him repeatedly, crying, playing the victim. She told everyone in the family that I had kicked her out of her granddaughter's birthday party for no reason, that I had forbidden her from seeing her grandchildren, that I was controlling and difficult. Some family members believed her version. They reached out to my husband, encouraging him to stand up to me, to not let me isolate him from his family, to remember that his mother loved him and was just trying to help. Other family members, interestingly, reached out to me. My sister-in-law, my husband's brother's wife, messaged me privately. She said she had dealt with Linda's criticism for years and had always wished someone would stand up to her. She said I had done the right thing. That gave me strength. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't just me being sensitive. I told my husband we needed marriage counseling. He didn't want to go. He said we could work it out ourselves. I told him this wasn't a negotiation. Either we go to counseling and work on this issue, or I would be talking to a lawyer about separation. That got his attention. We started counseling the following week. In therapy, things came out that I hadn't fully realized. My husband's fear of disappointing his mother, his belief that maintaining peace was more important than addressing conflict, his inability to see how his silence was actually a choice that hurt me. The therapist helped him understand that by not defending me, he was sending a message that his mother's opinion mattered more than mine, that he was teaching our children that it was okay to disrespect their mother, that he was damaging our marriage by prioritizing his mother's feelings over his wife's well-being. It took several months of therapy, but my husband started to change. He began recognizing when his mother was being critical. He started speaking up. Gently at first, then more firmly. Linda did not take it well. She accused him of being brainwashed by me, of choosing sides, of being disloyal. She cried. She gave him the silent treatment. She tried every manipulation tactic she had, but he held firm. With the therapist's support, he set clear boundaries. Linda could see the grandchildren, but visits would be supervised and limited. She was not allowed to criticize my parenting. She was not allowed to undermine my rules with the kids. If she couldn't respect these boundaries, her visits would end. She tested the boundaries multiple times. She would make snide comments and then claim she was joking. She would buy the kids things I had specifically said no to. She would try to guilt-trip my husband into relaxing the rules. Each time, he enforced the consequences, cut visits short, reduced frequency, made it clear that her behavior had direct results. Eventually, Linda realized he was serious. She started, very slowly, to moderate her behavior. The criticism didn't stop entirely, but it decreased. She learned which topics were off limits. She learned to bite her tongue more often. Our relationship would never be warm or close. Too much damage had been done, but it became manageable, tolerable. She could be in our lives without destroying my peace. The bigger change was in my marriage. My husband and I grew closer through this process. He learned to prioritize our immediate family over his extended family. He learned that standing up to his mother didn't make him a bad son. It made him a better husband and father. Looking back, I don't regret kicking her out of that birthday party. It was the catalyst we needed. Things had to break before they could be rebuilt properly. My daughter is 9 now. She doesn't remember much about that birthday. What she does remember is that we had a second celebration with her best friend, and it was fun. She also He knows that her dad stands up for our family, that both her parents are a united team. That's worth more than any perfectly executed birthday party ever could be. Next up is a story about someone who found out their best friend had been sleeping with their ex, and the messy aftermath that followed. This story involves betrayal from someone who was supposed to be a best friend, and how finding out the truth changed everything. I had known Jessica since middle school. We had been through everything together: first crushes, driver's licenses, college applications, breakups. She was the person I called when anything good or bad happened in my life. She was supposed to be my best friend forever. I dated Marcus for 4 years. We met in college and stayed together after graduation. The relationship had its problems, like any long-term relationship, but I loved him. I thought we had a future together. Marcus and Jessica knew each other through me. They were friendly, but not particularly close, or so I thought. Marcus and I broke up about 6 months before everything came to light. The breakup was his idea. He said he needed space to figure out what he wanted, that he wasn't sure about our future together, that he needed time to be alone and work on himself. I was devastated. Jessica was there for me through all of it. She listened to me cry. She brought me ice cream. She told me Marcus was an idiot. She helped me pack up his things from my apartment. She was exactly what a best friend should be during a breakup. After the breakup, I stayed in touch with some of Marcus's friends, not to get information about him, but because I genuinely liked some of them and didn't want to lose those friendships just because Marcus and I didn't work out. About 6 months after the breakup, one of those friends, Derek, asked to meet me for coffee. He seemed uncomfortable. He kept starting and stopping sentences. Finally, he told me there was something I should know, and he had been debating whether to tell me. He said Marcus had started dating someone new. That part didn't surprise me or hurt me. 6 months was a reasonable amount of time, and I had been slowly moving on too. Then he told me who Marcus was dating. Jessica. My best friend Jessica. I didn't believe him at first. I told him he must be mistaken. Derek showed me photos from social media. Marcus and Jessica at a restaurant, at a movie theater, at a party. The photos were recent, from the past few weeks. I felt nauseous. I called Jessica immediately. She didn't answer. I texted her. No response. I called again. Nothing. I drove to her apartment. She wasn't home. Or at least she didn't answer the door. Finally, she called me back hours later. She sounded nervous. I asked her directly if she was dating Marcus. There was a long pause. Then she admitted it. But she framed it like it had just happened, like it was new and unexpected. She said they had run into each other a few weeks ago and realized they had feelings for each other. She said she was planning to tell me, but she wanted to make sure it was serious first. She said she hoped I would understand and be happy for her. I was too shocked to respond properly. I said something about needing time to process and hung up. Over the next few days, I did what any person in my situation would do. I investigated. I looked back through social media posts. I thought about comments and behaviors I had dismissed at the time. I talked to other friends and asked casual questions. The truth that emerged was so much worse than Jessica had admitted. They hadn't just started dating a few weeks ago. They had been seeing each other for at least 4 months, maybe longer. Multiple people had seen them together at various times and places. Some people had assumed I knew and was okay with it. Others had felt uncomfortable but didn't know how to tell me, which meant Jessica had been sleeping with Marcus while she was comforting me about my breakup with him, while she was helping me pack his things, while she was telling me he was an idiot and I deserved better. She had been lying to my face for months. Even worse, I started to suspect that maybe their relationship had started before Marcus and I broke up. The timeline was suspicious. Marcus's sudden need for space, and his vague reasons for ending things. Jessica's enthusiastic support of the breakup, encouraging me not to fight for the relationship. Her insistence that I deserved someone better, and that Marcus and I weren't right for each other. I confronted her again, this time with what I had learned. I asked her point blank how long it had been going on. She stuck to her story at first. Then, When I told her I knew she was lying, she broke down and admitted it had been about 4 months. I asked if anything had happened while Marcus and I were still together. She swore it hadn't. She said they had feelings for each other but never acted on them until after the breakup. She said they had tried to stay away from each other out of respect for me, but eventually their feelings were too strong. I didn't believe her. Maybe nothing physical had happened before the breakup, but emotional infidelity was still betrayal, and the lying for months afterward was unforgivable. I told her our friendship was over. She cried. She begged me to understand. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she had fallen in love and couldn't help it. She said Marcus and I had already broken up, so technically she hadn't done anything wrong. I told her that even if they got together after the breakup, the right thing to do would have been to tell me immediately, to give me the choice about whether I could handle staying friends. Instead, she had lied, snuck around, and let me confide in her about my heartbreak, while she was secretly with the person who had caused it. She said I was being unfair, that I didn't own Marcus just because we had dated, that she had a right to pursue happiness, that I was letting jealousy ruin our friendship. I hung up on her and blocked her number. The fallout was messy. We had mutual friends, and everyone had to pick sides. Some people sympathized with me and cut Jessica off. Others thought I was overreacting and maintained friendships with both of us. A few people tried to stay neutral, which mostly meant they stayed friends with Jessica and avoided me. Marcus reached out to me once. He sent a long text message apologizing for how things had played out. He said he never meant to hurt me. He said what he and Jessica had was real, and he hoped eventually I could be happy for them. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He had moved on with my best friend and had probably been emotionally involved with her while we were still together. His apology meant nothing. The hardest part was losing Jessica. As angry as I was, I also grieved the friendship. She had been such a huge part of my life. I had memories with her going back over a decade. I had imagined her being at my wedding someday, being an aunt figure to my future kids, being in my life forever. All of that was gone, erased by her betrayal. I went through phases of emotion, anger, sadness, confusion, acceptance, then back to anger again. I replayed conversations and memories, looking for signs I should have seen. I wondered if she had always been the kind of person who would do this, or if something had changed. I also had to confront uncomfortable questions about my own judgment. How had I not noticed? How had I trusted someone so completely who was capable of this level of deception? What did that say about me? My therapist helped me understand that Jessica's choices were about Jessica, not about me. That some people are good at hiding who they really are. That being trusting and loyal isn't a character flaw, even when someone takes advantage of those qualities. About a year later, I heard through mutual friends that Jessica and Marcus had broken up. Apparently, the relationship hadn't lasted once the excitement of sneaking around was gone. Or maybe the foundation of lies and betrayal wasn't strong enough to build something lasting. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt sad. Sad for the time wasted, the friendship lost, the trust broken. Jessica tried to reach out to me after they broke up. She sent me a message apologizing and saying she realized she had made a terrible mistake. She said she missed our friendship and hoped we could eventually repair it. I thought about it for a long time. Could I forgive her? Should I? Ultimately, I decided no, not because I was still angry, but because I didn't trust her anymore. A friendship without trust isn't really a friendship. It's just two people going through the motions. I responded politely but firmly. I told her I appreciated the apology, but too much damage had been done. I wished her well, but I didn't want to rekindle the friendship. She didn't take it well. She sent several more messages about how I was holding a grudge, how I wasn't giving her a chance to make things right, how everyone makes mistakes. I blocked her again. I had given her my answer. Anything more would just be her trying to make herself feel better, not actually respecting my boundaries. It's been 3 years now. I've built new friendships, and stronger ones, with people who have proven themselves trustworthy. I've learned to be more cautious about who I let into my inner circle. I've learned that actions matter more than words. I don't hate Jessica anymore. I don't think about her much at all. When I do, I mostly just feel grateful that I learned who she really was before she could betray me in even worse ways down the line. As for Marcus, I occasionally see updates about him through social media. He's dating someone new. She's welcome to him. I've moved on completely, and I'm genuinely happier now than I was in that relationship. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of hurting you the most, not because they're evil, but because they're selfish, weak, or too focused on their own wants to consider the consequences of their actions. It also taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. I survived losing my boyfriend and my best friend at the same time. I rebuilt my life. I learned to trust again, carefully, and I came out on the other side as a more discerning, more resilient person. I don't regret cutting them both out of my life. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, and that's okay. Forgiveness isn't always the right answer. Sometimes the right answer is to walk away and never look back. Let's shift to a workplace story about someone whose boss took malicious compliance to a whole new level. This next story is about someone who had a terrible boss and how they used malicious compliance to make a point that eventually led to the boss getting demoted. I worked in customer service for a large telecommunications company. The job was already stressful. Angry customers, technical problems, complicated billing issues. But my boss, Janet, made it so much worse. Janet was a micromanager. She monitored everything: how long we spent on each call, how many bathroom breaks we took, whether we were a minute late coming back from lunch. She had rules for everything, and she enforced them rigidly without any consideration for context or common sense. One of her biggest rules was about call time. She wanted every customer service call resolved in under 6 minutes. It didn't matter if the customer had a complex issue. It didn't matter if the problem required multiple system checks or transfers. 6 minutes or less. If your average call time went over 6 minutes, you got written up. This created obvious problems. We would rush through calls, not fully resolving issues, just trying to get customers off the phone before the 6-minute mark. Customers would call back angry because their problem wasn't fixed. We would get yelled at for having repeat calls. But Janet didn't care. She just kept insisting on the 6-minute rule. She also had rules about transfers. She didn't want us transferring calls to other departments unless absolutely necessary. She said the transfers made our department look incompetent. Never mind that some issues genuinely required specialized knowledge from technical support or billing departments. If we transferred a call, we had to fill out a detailed form explaining why the transfer was necessary. Janet would review these forms and often reject them, insisting we should have handled the issue ourselves. The combination of these two rules created an impossible situation. We couldn't take the time needed to properly resolve complex issues because of the 6-minute limit, but we also couldn't transfer those issues to people who could actually help because of the transfer restrictions. Multiple team members tried talking to Janet about this. We explained that the rules were contradictory and were actually hurting customer satisfaction. She dismissed our concerns. She said if we were better at our jobs, we wouldn't have these problems. She said the rules were clear and we just needed to follow them. I decided to follow them. Exactly. Maliciously. I started enforcing both rules to the absolute letter in the most unhelpful way possible. A customer would call with a complex billing issue. I would spend 5.5 minutes giving them useless troubleshooting steps that I knew wouldn't solve their problem. Then, right before the 6-minute mark, I would tell them their issue required special billing review, and I would send them an email with next steps. Then, I would end the call. My average call time stayed under 6 minutes. I wasn't transferring calls. I was following both rules perfectly, but I wasn't actually solving any problems. Customers were furious. They would call back, get someone else, and complain about the useless service they had received. My name started coming up in customer complaints. Janet called me into her office. She showed me the complaints. She asked me what was going on. I explained, very calmly, that I was following her rules, 6 minutes or less per call. No unnecessary transfers. If that meant I couldn't fully resolve issues, well, those were the rules. She told me I was being deliberately difficult. I told her I was being deliberately compliant. She had made the rules clear. I was following them. She told me to use common sense. I asked her to clarify which rule I should break, the 6-minute rule or the no transfer rule, because following both made it impossible to properly help customers with complex issues. She couldn't answer that. She just told me to figure it out and dismissed me. I continued my malicious compliance. So did several of my coworkers, who had caught on to what I was doing. We all started following the rules exactly as written, providing fast but useless service. Customer satisfaction scores for our department plummeted. Within 2 weeks, we were getting complaints not just from individual customers, but from the company's social media team, which was being flooded with angry posts about our terrible service. Janet's boss got involved. He started sitting in on calls, monitoring the team, trying to figure out what was going wrong. He listened to my calls. He heard me give rapid-fire responses that technically addressed the customer's question, but didn't actually solve anything. He heard me end calls right before the 6-minute mark, leaving customers frustrated and confused. He pulled me aside and asked what I was doing. I showed him Janet's rules, the 6-minute requirement, the transfer restrictions, the written warnings I had received for going over time or transferring calls. I explained that I was simply following the rules as stated. He pulled Janet into the conversation. He asked her to explain the rules. She did, defensively. He pointed out that the rules were contradictory and were clearly causing the customer satisfaction problems. Janet insisted the rules weren't the problem. The employees were the problem. If we were better trained, more competent, more dedicated, we could follow the rules and still provide good service. Her boss asked her how. Specifically, how could a customer service representative resolve a complex technical issue that required specialized knowledge in under 6 minutes without transferring the call? Janet couldn't answer. She just kept saying it was possible if we tried harder. Her boss was not impressed. He suspended the 6-minute rule pending a department review. He also loosened the transfer restrictions, allowing us to transfer calls whenever we genuinely believed another department could help. Janet was furious. She felt undermined. She blamed me and my coworkers for making her look bad. She started retaliating in small ways, giving us the worst shifts, denying time-off requests, nitpicking other aspects of our work. But the damage was done. Upper management was now aware that Janet's management style was causing serious problems. They started monitoring her more closely. They started listening to employee complaints they had previously ignored. 3 months later, Janet was demoted. She was moved to a non-supervisory role in a different department. A new manager was brought in, someone with actual customer service experience who understood that rigid rules without flexibility create more problems than they solve. The new manager immediately changed the metrics. Instead of focusing on call time, we were evaluated on customer satisfaction and first call resolution. We were encouraged to transfer calls when appropriate. We were given leeway to spend whatever time was necessary to actually help people. Morale improved immediately. Customer satisfaction scores went back up. The job was still stressful, but it was manageable stress, not the impossible situation Janet had created. I felt vindicated, but I also felt a little bad. I hadn't set out to get Janet demoted. I just wanted her to see how unreasonable her rules were. The malicious compliance was meant to make a point, not to ruin her career. But then I remembered all the times she had dismissed legitimate concerns from her team. All the times she had prioritized her metrics over actually helping customers or supporting her employees. All the times she had blamed us for problems she had created. She had done this to herself. The malicious compliance had just exposed what was already there. A manager who cared more about arbitrary numbers than about doing the job well. The experience taught me something valuable about workplace dynamics. Sometimes following bad rules exactly as written is the best way to demonstrate why they're bad rules. Sometimes malicious compliance is the only tool employees have when management won't listen to reason. It also taught me to be careful about what metrics you measure. When you optimize for the wrong thing, like call time, instead of customer satisfaction, you get exactly what you measured for, even if it's not what you actually wanted. Janet stayed with the company in her new role. We didn't interact much after her demotion. I heard she was bitter about what happened, convinced she had been treated unfairly. She never seemed to understand that her own rigid, thoughtless management style had been the problem. I eventually moved on to a different job, but I've never forgotten that lesson. Good rules have flexibility. Good management requires understanding context. And sometimes the best way to fight bad policy is to follow it so precisely that everyone can see how bad it really is. This story is about someone whose neighbor kept parking in their assigned spot, ignored all polite requests to stop, and finally faced some creative consequences. I lived in an apartment complex with assigned parking. Each unit got one spot with the apartment number clearly painted on the asphalt. My spot was number 23, right in front of my building. It was convenient, well lit, and one of the reasons I chose that particular apartment. My new neighbor, Brad, moved into apartment 31, which was in the next building over. His assigned spot was farther from the entrance, in a less convenient location. Within a week of moving in, Brad started parking in my spot. The first time it happened, I assumed it was an honest mistake. New resident maybe didn't understand the system yet. I left a polite note on his windshield explaining that spot 23 was assigned to my apartment, and could he please park in his assigned spot 31. The next day, he was in my spot again. No response to my note, just parked there like he owned it. I knocked on his door. A guy in his late 20s answered, looking annoyed that I had disturbed him. I introduced myself and politely explained the parking situation. He looked at me like I was being ridiculous. He said the spots weren't really assigned. He said it was first come, first serve. I showed him the lease agreement I had pulled up on my phone, which clearly stated that parking spots were assigned and residents must park in their designated spaces. He shrugged, said he preferred spot 23 because it was closer to his apartment than spot 31 was, said I should just park in a different spot since there were usually empty ones available. I explained that I paid rent that included an assigned spot, that spot 23 was mine, that he needed to use his own spot. He said I was being uptight about something that didn't matter. Then he closed the door in my face. I was stunned. I had expected him to be apologetic, maybe a little embarrassed. Instead, he was openly dismissive and entitled. The next morning, he was in my spot again. I had to park in a visitor spot far from my building. It was raining, and I got soaked walking from the distant parking area to my apartment. I went to the apartment office. I explained the situation to the property manager. She sighed, like she had heard this before. She said she would send Brad a warning letter. The warning letter didn't help. Brad continued parking in my spot. I continued complaining to the office. They sent more letters. They called him. They threatened fines. Nothing changed. Brad seemed to enjoy the situation. A few times when I saw him in the parking lot, he would smirk at me. Once he made a comment about how some people needed to learn to share. I was furious, but felt powerless. The property management company was useless. They wouldn't tow his car because they said it was still parked in a legal resident spot, just not his assigned one. They said it was a civil matter between residents. I looked into my legal options. I could take him to small claims court, but that seemed like a massive hassle for a parking spot. I could continue filing complaints, but that clearly wasn't working. I needed a different approach. I started documenting everything. Every time Brad parked in my spot, I took a photo with a timestamp. I kept a log. I saved all correspondence with the property management. I wanted a record in case I needed it later. Then I got creative. Brad's car was a nice sedan. Not brand new, but well maintained. He clearly cared about it. I noticed he washed it regularly and kept it spotless. I started parking my car directly behind his whenever he was in my spot, blocking him in completely. If he was going to take my spot, he was going to be inconvenienced too. The first time I did it, he came pounding on my door at 7 in the morning. He had to get to work, and I was blocking him in. I took my time answering the door. I was in my bathrobe, clearly not ready to go anywhere. I told him I would move my car when I was ready to leave. He said he needed to leave now. I said that was unfortunate. Maybe he should have parked in his own assigned spot. He threatened to call the police. I said go ahead. I was parked in a visitor spot, which was legal, and we could explain to the police why he was in my assigned spot. He called my bluff. He actually did call the non-emergency police line. An officer came out. Brad explained the situation. The officer looked at our lease agreements, looked at the parking situation, and told Brad to park in his own spot. Brad was furious, but had to wait while I got dressed, had breakfast, and eventually, 45 minutes later, moved my car so he could leave. He was late for work. I thought that would solve the problem. It didn't. The next day, Brad parked in my spot again, so I blocked him in again. This became our routine. He would take my spot. I would block him in. He would have to knock on my door and wait, increasingly angry while I took my sweet time moving my car. Sometimes I wouldn't hear him knocking because I had headphones on. Sometimes I was in the shower. Sometimes I just decided to have a very long breakfast before I was ready to move. Brad started parking in my spot less frequently, but he didn't stop entirely. He seemed to view it as a battle of wills now, like he couldn't let me win. So I escalated. I learned Brad's work schedule. He left every morning at 7:30. I started setting my alarm for 6 a.m. I would park my car in my spot early before he left, ensuring he couldn't take it. On days when I didn't need my car, I would still get up early, move my car into my spot just to block him, then go back inside and go back to sleep. Brad's parking options dwindled. He had to either use his assigned spot, which he hated, or park in the far visitor spots. Either way, he wasn't getting my convenient spot anymore, but I wasn't done. Brad had made this personal by being so dismissive and entitled, so I decided to make him regret ever messing with my parking spot. I noticed Brad went to the gym every day after work, around 6 p.m. He would be gone for about 90 minutes. During that time, his car sat in whatever spot he had found that day. I started leaving notes on his car during that time. Not angry notes, polite, friendly notes, but weird ones. Your car looks thirsty today. Make sure to give it plenty of water. I saw your car talking to the silver Honda earlier. I think they're planning something. Your left front tire seems sad. Maybe it needs a compliment. Just strange, unsettling notes that would make him question who was leaving them and why. I varied the handwriting. I used different types of paper. I wanted him to feel like random people were leaving him bizarre messages, not just me. Brad started looking paranoid. He would check his car multiple times a day. He installed a dash cam, presumably to catch whoever was leaving the notes. I made sure to approach his car from angles the camera couldn't see, wearing different clothes each time. The notes continued for weeks. Brad started parking in different spots each day, trying to be unpredictable. It didn't matter. I always found his car. Then I added a new element. I started leaving small, harmless items on his car. A plastic toy soldier standing on his hood, a rubber duck on his windshield, a single plastic spoon on his roof. Nothing that caused damage, just weird little objects that appeared mysteriously. I could see Brad unraveling. He looked tired, stressed. He was constantly checking over his shoulder in the parking lot. He had reported the notes to the property management, but they couldn't do anything about weird but harmless messages. He had no proof of who was doing it. Finally, after 2 months of this psychological warfare, Brad came to my door. He looked defeated. He said he was sorry for parking in my spot. He said he would use his assigned spot from now on. He asked if I knew anything about the strange notes and items being left on his car. I said I had no idea what he was talking about. I said there were a lot of weird people in the world. I accepted his apology and said I was glad we could move past the parking issue. Brad kept his word. He never parked in my spot again. The notes and random items stopped appearing on his car. Life returned to normal. About 6 months later, Brad moved out. I heard through another neighbor that he had found the apartment complex too stressful, that weird things kept happening that made him uncomfortable. The neighbor said he seemed paranoid and unhappy. I felt a little bit bad, but mostly I felt satisfied. Brad had been given multiple chances to simply respect the assigned parking rules. He had chosen entitlement and dismissiveness instead. He had turned a simple situation into a conflict, and he had lost. The parking spot remained mine, as it had always been supposed to be, and I never had another problem with neighbors taking my space. Word had apparently spread that it wasn't worth the hassle. Looking back, I probably took the revenge too far. The notes and items were psychologically manipulative. But at the time, after weeks of being dismissed and disrespected, it felt justified. Brad had been unwilling to show basic courtesy, so I made him regret that choice. Would I do it again? Honestly, yes. Sometimes people need to learn that their actions have consequences. That being entitled and rude doesn't pay off. That sometimes the person you're annoying has more creativity and persistence than you do. Brad learned that lesson, and I got my parking spot back. Let's dive into a story about someone whose family forgot their birthday and how they decided to handle it. This next story is from someone whose family completely forgot their birthday for the third year in a row, and their decision to stop celebrating family birthdays altogether. Birthdays had always been a big deal in my family. Growing up, we celebrated everyone. Cakes, presents, family dinners. My parents made each of us feel special on our day. It was a tradition I valued. As an adult, I continued that tradition. I never forgot a family birthday. My parents, my 3 siblings, my nieces and nephews. I kept a calendar. I sent cards. I bought thoughtful gifts. I showed up to parties. I made people feel remembered and loved. Then my 30th birthday came around. Nobody called. Nobody texted. No cards arrived in the mail. My parents didn't acknowledge it. My siblings were silent. It was like the day didn't exist. I spent the day feeling hurt and confused. I checked my phone constantly, thinking surely someone would remember eventually. By evening, I had one happy birthday message from a coworker and another from a college friend who Facebook reminded. Nobody in my family said a word. The next day, I called my mom. I mentioned, casually, that yesterday had been my birthday. There was a pause. Then she gasped. She had completely forgotten. She apologized profusely. She said she had been busy with my dad's medical appointments and it had just slipped her mind. I told her it was okay, even though it hurt. She promised to make it up to me. She never did. My siblings eventually found out they had missed my birthday. Each of them sent a belated text apology. Things had been busy. They were dealing with their own stuff. They felt bad, but made no real effort to make amends. I tried not to dwell on it. People forget things. Life gets hectic. It was disappointing, but I decided to move on. Then my 31st birthday came. Again, silence from my family. My parents forgot. My siblings forgot. Again. This time I didn't call to remind them. I waited to see how long it would take for someone to realize. 3 days passed before my younger sister sent a text saying, OMG, I just realized your birthday was Tuesday. I'm so sorry. No gift, no call. Just a text acknowledgement that she had forgotten and felt vaguely bad about it. I responded politely, but I was deeply hurt. Twice in a row felt like a pattern. It felt like my birthday didn't matter to them. Like I didn't matter to them. At least not enough to mark the date on a calendar or set a reminder. I started pulling back. I still sent cards and gifts for their birthdays, but I scaled back. Instead of thoughtful, personalized presents, I sent gift cards. Instead of heartfelt messages, I sent brief but polite notes. I was going through the motions but without the emotional investment. Then my 32nd birthday arrived. You can guess what happened. Complete silence from every family member. This time, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. 3 years in a row. 3 years of being forgotten while I continued to remember everyone else. 3 years of the message that my birthday wasn't worth acknowledging. A week after my birthday, my mom called about something unrelated. During the conversation, she mentioned my nephew's upcoming birthday and asked what I was planning to get him. Something in me snapped. I said I hadn't planned anything. She sounded surprised and asked why. I pointed out that she had forgotten my birthday the week before. For the third year in a row, she was quiet. Then she got defensive. She said I was being petty. That birthdays weren't that important for adults anyway, that she had a lot on her plate and couldn't be expected to remember every little thing. I told her that if birthdays weren't important for adults, then I wouldn't be celebrating any adult birthdays anymore, including hers, including my dad's, including all of my siblings. She said I was overreacting. I said I was being consistent. If my birthday wasn't worth remembering, then neither were theirs. She tried to guilt trip me, said I was punishing everyone for her mistake, said family was supposed to support each other, not keep score, said I was being immature and selfish. I told her I had supported the family. For years, I had remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every important date. I had shown up with gifts and cards and genuine affection, and in return, my own family had forgotten my birthday 3 years running. I said I was done being the only one who put in effort. If they wanted to have a family that celebrated birthdays, they needed to actually celebrate everyone's birthday, not just the ones that were convenient to remember. She hung up on me, angry. Within hours, I got texts from my siblings. They had talked to Mom. They thought I was being unreasonable. They acknowledged they had forgotten my birthday, but it wasn't intentional. Life was busy. They still loved me. I was making too big a deal out of this. I responded to each of them individually. I pointed out that I had never forgotten their birthdays despite being just as busy, that remembering takes minimal effort, a calendar reminder or a simple note, that the issue wasn't whether they loved me, it was whether they valued me enough to perform the basic act of acknowledgement that I perform for them every year. Some of them argued with me. Others went silent. None of them seemed to understand why I was so upset. My nephew's birthday came 2 weeks later. I didn't send a gift. I didn't acknowledge it. My sister, his mother, called me furious. How could I ignore her son's birthday? He was just a child. He had nothing to do with the adult drama. I explained that I wasn't participating in family birthday celebrations anymore. Not for anyone. Not until the family as a whole decided that birthdays mattered for everyone, not just some people. She called me cruel, said I was punishing a child for adult mistakes. I told her she was welcome to feel that way, but my decision stood. Over the next several months, every family birthday passed without acknowledgement from me. My dad's birthday, my older brother's birthday, my younger sister's birthday. Each one resulted in angry calls and texts about how I was tearing the family apart over something stupid. I held my ground. I pointed out that I wasn't the one who had forgotten birthdays. I wasn't the one who had failed to perform a basic gesture of love and remembrance. I was simply treating birthdays with the same level of importance they had shown mine. None. My 33rd birthday arrived. This time, everyone remembered. I got calls. I got texts. I got cards and even a few gifts. My mom insisted on taking me to dinner. It felt hollow. They were only remembering because I had forced them to by withdrawing my own participation. Not because they genuinely cared, but because they wanted me to resume buying gifts and acknowledging their birthdays. I went to the dinner with my mom. I accepted the gifts. I said thank you. But I told them that I still wasn't resuming birthday celebrations for others. 1 year of remembering after 3 years of forgetting didn't fix the underlying issue. My family was baffled. They had done what I wanted. They had remembered. Why wasn't I satisfied? I tried to explain that it wasn't just about remembering my birthday. It was about the pattern of behavior that forgetting revealed. The fact that I was low on their priority list, that I was taken for granted, that my effort and thoughtfulness over the years had never been matched or appreciated. They didn't get it. Or maybe they did get it, but didn't want to acknowledge it. Either way, the family dynamics had fundamentally changed. I've maintained my position. I don't celebrate family birthdays anymore. Not theirs, not mine. When my birthday comes around each year, my family remembers now. Probably out of fear I'll get angry again. But I keep my own celebrations small and private. Dinner with friends. A quiet day doing things I enjoy. No family involvement. And I don't miss it. I thought I would feel sad about losing that family tradition. Instead, I feel relieved. I'm no longer responsible for maintaining a tradition that was one-sided. I'm no longer setting myself up for disappointment when my effort isn't reciprocated. My family still doesn't understand. They think I'm holding a grudge, being stubborn, refusing to forgive. But it's not about forgiveness. I've forgiven them for forgetting. What I haven't done is forgotten what those 3 years taught me about my place in the family hierarchy, about who puts in effort and who takes that effort for granted. Some traditions are worth maintaining, others are worth letting go. This one, with this family, wasn't worth the emotional labor I was putting into it. I'm happier now. Lighter, free from the expectation that I'll continue being the family member who cares more, tries harder, and gets less in return. Maybe someday we'll find a new tradition that works better, one where effort is mutual and appreciation goes both ways. But until then, I'm content with my decision. Some bridges need to be burned so you can stop walking across them alone. Our next story is about someone who discovered their roommate had been eating their food and lying about it for months. This story involves a roommate who denied eating food they didn't buy, the mounting evidence that proved otherwise, and the petty but effective revenge that followed. I moved in with Emma because we were both looking for roommates and seemed compatible. Split the rent evenly, divided the household chores reasonably, and generally stayed out of each other's way. For the first few months, everything was fine. Then I started noticing my food disappearing. Small things at first. A yogurt I was sure I had in the fridge, a few slices of bread, some leftovers I had been planning to eat for lunch. I initially thought I was misremembering. Maybe I had eaten that yogurt and forgotten. Maybe I had finished the bread earlier in the week. I didn't want to be the kind of person who made a big deal about minor things, but it kept happening, and it was getting less subtle. Half a carton of milk gone overnight, an entire package of cheese I had just bought, expensive deli meat I had specifically purchased for sandwiches throughout the week. I decided to talk to Emma. I approached it gently. I asked if she had maybe eaten some of my food by mistake. She looked offended. She said no, she would never do that. She had her own food. She suggested maybe I was eating more than I realized, or miscounting what I bought. I wanted to believe her, but the food kept vanishing. I started keeping mental notes of exactly what I purchased and when. I checked the fridge more regularly. The pattern was undeniable. My food was disappearing, and Emma was the only other person with access to our apartment. I brought it up again, more directly this time. I said I was certain food was disappearing, and could she please just tell me if she was eating my stuff so we could figure out a system. Maybe we could split groceries, or she could pay me back for what she ate. Emma got defensive. She insisted she wasn't touching my food. She said I was being paranoid and accusatory. She suggested I might need to see a doctor if I was losing track of things this badly. She made me feel like I was the crazy one for even bringing it up. But I knew I wasn't crazy, so I decided to get proof. I started marking my food. Not obviously, but in ways I could track. I would count exact numbers. I would position items in specific ways so I could tell if they had been moved. I started keeping receipts and taking photos of groceries immediately after putting them away. The evidence mounted. Items I had photographed would be partially eaten or completely gone within a day or two. Things I had carefully positioned would be moved and then replaced slightly wrong, like someone was trying to hide that they had accessed them. I confronted Emma again with my documentation. Photos, timestamps, clear evidence that food was disappearing. She looked at the photos and said it proved nothing. Maybe I had eaten those things and taken the photos afterward to make her look bad. Maybe I was trying to get out of paying my share of rent by creating false drama. I was astounded by the gaslighting. She was standing there, absolutely committed to her lie, trying to make me doubt my own sanity. I decided I needed video evidence. I ordered a small camera online and set it up in the kitchen, positioned to see the refrigerator. I didn't tell Emma about it. I just let it record. Within 2 days, I had what I needed. Clear video of Emma opening the fridge, taking my food, and eating it. Not once. Multiple times. She would check to see if I was home, and if I wasn't, she would help herself to whatever she wanted. The yogurt I bought, the expensive jam, the leftover Chinese food I had been looking forward to. I compiled the best clips. Then I waited for the right moment to confront her. That moment came when Emma got angry at me for allegedly using her shampoo. She went on a rant about respect and boundaries and how roommates needed to keep their hands off each other's belongings. The irony was incredible. I let her finish. Then I told her I wanted to show her something. I pulled up the video footage on my laptop. The color drained from her face as she watched herself eating my food over and over again. She tried to sputter excuses. She said she had been so hungry. She said she was going to replace it. She said it was only a few times. I showed her the timestamps. It wasn't a few times, it was constant. Nearly every day for months. She had been systematically stealing my food while lying to my face and making me feel crazy for noticing. Emma started crying. She apologized. She said she had been struggling financially and couldn't afford groceries. She said she was embarrassed to admit it, so she had just taken food and hoped I wouldn't notice. I might have felt sympathetic if she had told me the truth when I asked. If she had admitted it any of the times I confronted her directly. But she hadn't. She had lied repeatedly. She had gaslit me. She had turned it around to make me seem paranoid and unreasonable. I told her she had 1 month to find a new place to live. I wanted her out. She tried to argue that she couldn't afford to move, that she had nowhere to go, that I was being cruel. I reminded her that she had been stealing from me for months, that she had lied about it repeatedly, that she had tried to make me doubt my own perception of reality. That was cruel. Me enforcing consequences was just reasonable. Emma tried a different tactic. She offered to pay me back for all the food. She said we could work out a payment plan. She promised it would never happen again. I said no. The trust was broken. I couldn't live with someone who would steal from me and lie so extensively. She needed to find another living situation. Emma spent the next month making my life difficult. She stopped doing her share of chores. She played loud music at odd hours. She had friends over constantly. She was trying to make me miserable, hoping I would give up on making her leave. But I had already talked to our landlord. The lease was in my name. Emma was a subletter. I had every right to end her sublease with proper notice. The landlord supported my decision, especially after I showed him the evidence of theft. When the month was up, Emma still hadn't found a new place. She said she needed more time. I said that was her problem, not mine. On the last day of the notice period, I had the locks changed. Emma came home to find her belongings packed and in the living room, and she couldn't get into the apartment. She called me screaming. I told her she could collect her things with 24 hours notice, which I was required to give her. I told her if she didn't collect them within a week, I would donate them. She showed up the next day with friends to move her stuff. She called me every name in the book. Her friends looked uncomfortable, but helped her load boxes into a truck. She told me I was a terrible person, and she hoped karma would get me. I reminded her that karma already had gotten her. She had stolen, lied, and gaslit me for months. Now she was being forced to move and scramble for housing. That was karma working exactly as intended. After Emma left, I deep cleaned the apartment. I bought new groceries and finally felt like I could keep food in my own fridge without it disappearing. The peace of not being stolen from in my own home was worth the hassle of finding a new roommate. I eventually found a new roommate through more careful vetting. I asked for references. I had an honest conversation about expectations and boundaries. I made sure this person understood that I took theft seriously and wouldn't tolerate it. The new living situation has been fine. Better than fine. I can buy groceries and actually eat them. I don't have to document and photograph my food. I don't have to wonder if I'm going crazy. Looking back, I wish I'd set up the camera sooner. I wasted months doubting myself, trying to give Emma the benefit of the doubt, letting her gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. The experience taught me to trust my perceptions. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone is making you doubt your own sanity, that's a red flag. And if someone steals from you and lies about it, they don't deserve your sympathy or your patience. Emma was in a difficult financial situation, and that's unfortunate. But stealing wasn't her only option. She could have asked me for help. She could have been honest about her struggles. We might have worked something out, split groceries, or adjusted rent temporarily. Instead, she chose deception. She chose to take what wasn't hers and lie about it. She chose to manipulate me emotionally when I questioned her. Those were conscious decisions that revealed her character. I have no regrets about kicking her out. Some people deserve second chances. Emma had multiple chances to come clean, and she chose dishonesty every time. That's not someone I wanted to live with or trust in my space. The apartment is peaceful now. My food stays where I put it, and I never have to see Emma's face again. All of that is worth far more than the rent money she contributed. This story comes from someone who discovered their in-laws were secretly supporting their spouse's ex financially, and what happened when they demanded it stop. My husband, Derek, and I had been married for 4 years when I found out. His parents, who I thought liked me well enough, had been keeping a significant secret that fundamentally changed how I saw our family dynamics. Derek had been married before me. His first wife, Ashley, had been his high school sweetheart. They married young, at 22, and divorced 2 years later. Derek rarely talked about her. He said it was an amicable split. They had both been too young, and they had gone their separate ways with no hard feelings. I had no reason to think about Ashley. She was ancient history, part of Derek's past before I existed in his life. I focused on our marriage, on building our future together. Then, I was at Derek's parents' house, helping his mother clean out a storage closet. We were sorting through old paperwork when I found a folder labeled financial records. I wasn't snooping. We were literally sorting papers to decide what to keep and what to shred. I opened the folder and found check registers, monthly payments of $800 to someone named Ashley Chen. The payments dated back years. I quickly realized Ashley Chen was Derek's ex-wife. She had remarried and taken her new husband's last name. I was confused. Why were my in-laws sending Derek's ex-wife money every month? I asked my mother-in-law about it directly, thinking there must be a reasonable explanation. Her face went pale. She took the folder from me and said it was a private family matter. I pressed her. Private family matter or not, this involved my husband's ex-wife, which made it relevant to me. I wanted to understand what was happening. She reluctantly explained. When Derek and Ashley divorced, Ashley had been in a difficult financial position. She had left her job to support Derek's career ambitions. She had put him through grad school. When they split, she was left with limited work experience and no degree. Derek's parents had felt guilty. They had encouraged the marriage when both kids were young. They had viewed Ashley as a daughter. When the divorce happened, they decided to help her financially until she got back on her feet. That was 11 years ago. Ashley was long since back on her feet. She had remarried. She had a career. But according to these records, Derek's parents were still sending her $800 a month, every single month, for over a decade. I calculated quickly in my head. $800 a month for 11 years was over $100,000. My in-laws had given Derek's ex-wife more than $100,000. I was stunned. I asked my mother-in-law if Derek knew. She said yes, he knew. He had been uncomfortable with it at first, but had accepted it was his parents' money and their decision. I felt betrayed. Derek had never mentioned this to me. Not once, in 4 years of marriage. His parents were financially supporting his ex-wife, and he had kept that information from me. I went home and confronted Derek. He admitted it was true. He had known the whole time. He hadn't told me because he knew I would be upset, and he didn't want to cause problems. I asked him how he could possibly think keeping the secret was better than telling me the truth. He said it wasn't a big deal. It was his parents' money. They could do what they wanted with it. I told him it absolutely was a big deal. His parents were giving his ex-wife almost $10,000 a year. Every year. While we were struggling to save for a house. While we were budgeting carefully and going without things to build our future. Derek said those two things weren't related. I said they absolutely were related. His parents were choosing to support his ex-wife instead of helping us. That was a choice, and it was a revealing one. He got defensive. He said I was being jealous and petty, that Ashley deserved help, that his parents felt responsible for encouraging a marriage that didn't work out. I pointed out that Ashley was remarried and employed. She didn't need help anymore. If she had needed temporary support after the divorce, fine. But 11 years later, when Derek and I were the ones actually trying to build a life and could use support, it didn't make sense, unless his parents still viewed Ashley as family more than they viewed me as family. Derek said I was overthinking it. I said I wasn't. The money was one thing. The secrecy was another. The fact that they actively hid this from me for 4 years meant they knew it was inappropriate and did it anyway. We fought for days. I refused to go to family dinners. Derek accused me of being stubborn. I accused him of being spineless and disloyal. Finally, I told Derek I wanted to talk to his parents directly. I wanted them to explain to my face why they thought this was acceptable. Derek tried to talk me out of it. He said it would cause unnecessary drama. I said the drama already existed. It had just been happening behind my back. We went to his parents' house. I was calm, but firm. I told them I knew about the payments to Ashley. I told them I found it disrespectful to our marriage. I told them I wanted it to stop. Derek's father got defensive immediately. He said it was none of my business what they did with their money. I said it became my business when it affected my marriage and when they kept it secret from me for years. Derek's mother tried a softer approach. She said they loved Ashley and felt responsible for her. She said the divorce had been hard on everyone. She said helping Ashley financially helped them feel better about the situation. I asked if they realized they were prioritizing Derek's ex-wife over their current daughter-in-law. I asked if they understood how that looked to me. I asked if they cared that Derek and I were struggling financially while they gave his ex-wife hundreds of dollars every month. Derek's mother said they had offered to help us before, and we had refused. This was true. They had offered us a loan for a Hanaboti down payment on a house, but there were strings attached and conditions we weren't comfortable with. We had declined and decided to save on our own. I pointed out that a conditional loan wasn't the same as unconditional gifts. They were giving Ashley free money every month with no expectations. They had offered us money with lots of expectations and control over how we used it. The conversation went nowhere. Derek's parents refused to stop the payments. They said it was their decision and they weren't going to be bullied into changing it. I said I wasn't bullying them. I was setting a boundary. If they were going to prioritize Ashley over our marriage, then I would be limiting my interaction with them. Derek was caught in the middle. He wanted to keep the peace with everyone. He kept trying to convince me I was being unreasonable. He kept trying to convince his parents to see my side. He was accomplishing nothing except making everyone angry. I gave Derek an ultimatum. Either he actively supported me in this boundary, or he didn't. But I needed to know where he stood. Was he my partner? Or was he still trying to keep his parents and his ex-wife happy at the expense of our marriage? He took a few days to think about it. In that time, I looked into the financial reality of what was happening. Derek's parents were retired and on a fixed income. They weren't wealthy. The $800 a month to Ashley was a significant portion of their monthly budget, which meant they were sacrificing their own financial security to support Ashley. And, by extension, they had less ability to help Derek and me in the future if we genuinely needed it. Their resources were going to someone outside the family instead of being saved or used for actual family needs. When I presented this to Derek, something clicked for him. He finally saw it from my perspective. His parents were making a choice that affected all of us. It wasn't just about being generous to Ashley. It was about priorities and loyalty, and where they chose to invest their limited resources. Derek talked to his parents again, this time without me. He told them he agreed with me. He told them the payments to Ashley needed to stop, not out of cruelty to Ashley, but because 11 years was more than enough time for temporary support. Because Ashley was remarried and stable. Because continuing the payments was damaging his current marriage and his relationship with them. His parents didn't take it well. They accused Derek of being controlled by me, of abandoning Ashley after she had supported him through grad school, of being ungrateful and selfish. Derek held firm. He said they could do what they wanted with their money, but he and I would not be participating in family events or maintaining a close relationship if they continued to prioritize Ashley over us. It took 3 months, but eventually, Derek's parents stopped the payments. His mother called Ashley and explained that they could no longer afford to continue the monthly support. I don't know how Ashley reacted. I never asked. The relationship with Derek's parents has been strained ever since. They blame me for forcing the issue. They see me as the villain who cut off their financial support to someone they cared about. Family dinners are awkward, holidays are tense, but Derek and I are stronger for it. He finally chose our marriage over keeping the peace. He finally stood up to his parents in a meaningful way. And he finally stopped treating his ex-wife's needs as more important than our current reality. We're saving for a house now without expecting any help from his parents. We're building our life on our own terms. And we're not carrying the weight of a secret that was undermining our marriage for years. I don't feel guilty about what I did. Ashley was receiving free money for more than a decade for a 2-year marriage that ended when she was 24 years old. She had more than enough time and support to build a new life. Derek's parents' continuing payments weren't about helping her anymore. They were about them not being able to let go of their guilt or their attachment to her. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means forcing people to face uncomfortable truths. Sometimes it means being the bad guy so your marriage can be healthy. Derek's parents will probably never forgive me fully. That's their choice. But Derek and I are building a future together without secrets, without divided loyalties, and without his ex-wife being funded by his family. And that's worth more than their approval. The next story involves someone whose college roommate falsely accused them of theft to cover up her own financial mistakes. This story is about someone whose roommate accused them of stealing money, reported them to university administration, and the truth that eventually came out. I was a junior in college, living in a campus apartment with 3 other girls. One of them, Madison, was someone I had known since freshman year. We weren't best friends, but we got along fine. The living situation was generally good. We split bills evenly, took turns buying shared household items, and respected each other's space. Then one day, Madison started acting strange around me. Cold, distant. She would leave a room when I entered. She stopped making eye contact. When I asked if everything was okay, she said it was fine, but clearly it wasn't. A few days later, I was called into a meeting with the university's residential life coordinator. I had no idea what it was about. I assumed maybe there had been a noise complaint or some minor rule violation. Instead, the coordinator told me that Madison had filed a formal complaint against me. She claimed I had stolen $500 from her. She said she had cash in her room that had gone missing, and I was the only person who had been in her room recently who could have taken it. I was shocked. I told the coordinator I hadn't taken any money. I hadn't even been in Madison's room except briefly a few weeks ago when a group of us watched a movie together. I certainly hadn't stolen anything. The coordinator said she was required to investigate all theft claims. She asked if I would agree to a search of my room and belongings. I said yes, immediately. I had nothing to hide. 2 residential advisors searched my room thoroughly. They didn't find any unusual amounts of cash. They didn't find anything that indicated I had recently come into money, because I hadn't. The coordinator asked me questions about my finances. How much money did I typically have? Did I have any recent expenses? Had I made any large purchases? I answered everything honestly. I was a broke college student. I had maybe $50 in my checking account at any given time. I worked a part-time job that barely covered my portion of rent and groceries. I wasn't exactly living large. The investigation seemed to stall. There was no evidence I had taken the money because I hadn't taken it. But Madison insisted I was guilty. She told our other roommates I was a thief. She told her friends. She created a hostile living environment where she openly accused me of stealing every chance she got. I was humiliated and angry. I couldn't prove a negative. I couldn't prove I hadn't taken money I never took. The accusation alone was damaging my reputation and making my living situation unbearable. I started avoiding the apartment. I studied at the library. I spent time at friends' places. Coming home meant facing Madison's glares and cold shoulders and occasional direct accusations. Our other two roommates were caught in the middle. They didn't know what to believe. They liked both of us and didn't want to take sides. But the tension was destroying the apartment dynamic. Then something interesting happened. Madison's parents came to visit. I happened to be in the apartment when they arrived. Madison's mother immediately confronted me. She said she knew I had stolen from her daughter. She threatened legal action. She said I was a thief and a liar, and she was going to make sure everyone knew it. I stayed calm. I told her I hadn't taken anything. I told her I had cooperated fully with the university investigation. I told her I was sorry her daughter's money was missing, but I wasn't responsible. Madison's father seemed less convinced than her mother. He asked Madison detailed questions. When exactly had the money gone missing? Where had she kept it? Who had access to her room? Had she checked everywhere carefully? Madison got flustered answering. Her story had some inconsistencies. She said the money had been in her desk drawer, but then she said it was in her closet. She said it disappeared 2 weeks ago, but earlier she had told the coordinator it was 3 weeks ago. Her father asked to see where she had kept the money. They went into her room. I heard raised voices. Then Madison started crying. Her parents left shortly after, both looking grim. Madison stayed in her room the rest of the day. The next day, Madison asked to talk to me. She looked terrible. She admitted the money had never been stolen. She had spent it on online shopping, on going out, on things she hadn't told her parents about. Her parents gave her a monthly allowance, and she was required to use it responsibly. She had blown through it in the first 2 weeks of the month. When her parents asked her about her spending, she panicked. She made up the story about the money being stolen to explain why she was broke. She had chosen me as the scapegoat because I'd been in her room recently, and she thought it would be believable. She hadn't expected the university to actually investigate. She thought she would just tell her parents. They would believe her, and that would be the end of it. But her parents had taken it seriously. They had reported it to the university. They had threatened legal action, and Madison had been forced to maintain the lie to an extent she hadn't anticipated. When her father started asking detailed questions during their visit, she realized she couldn't keep the story straight. After they left, they called her and told her they knew she was lying. They had found her purchase history on her credit card statement. They saw the online shopping, the restaurant charges, the bar tabs. They threatened to pull her out of school if she didn't come clean. So she did. She admitted to them that she had lied, that she had falsely accused me, that the money had never been stolen. Now she was apologizing to me. She said she was so sorry. She said she had panicked and made a terrible decision. She said she never meant for it to go so far. I was furious. She had accused me of a crime. She had subjected me to an investigation. She had damaged my reputation. She had made my living situation hostile for weeks. And her excuse was that she panicked about overspending. I told her sorry wasn't enough. She needed to formally clear my name with the university. She needed to tell our roommates the truth. She needed to tell every person she had told about the supposed theft that she had lied. Madison agreed. She went to the residential life coordinator and admitted she had made a false accusation. She explained that no theft had occurred. The coordinator was not pleased. False accusations were taken seriously. Madison faced disciplinary action from the university for filing a false report. She also told our roommates the truth. They were angry with her, but mostly just relieved the drama was over. She posted on social media, admitting she had falsely accused someone of theft and apologizing for spreading lies. The damage to her reputation was significant. People who had been sympathetic to her now saw her as a liar. Friends distanced themselves. Her parents cut her allowance as punishment and made her get a job to cover her expenses. As for me, I was cleared officially, but the experience left a mark. Some people never heard about the resolution. They just remembered hearing I had been accused of theft. The full vindication didn't spread as widely as the initial accusation. I wanted Madison to move out, but we were both stuck in a lease until the end of the semester. We tolerated each other, but barely interacted. When the lease ended, I made sure to live with completely different people. Looking back, I'm still angry about what she put me through. Her lie was selfish and cowardly. She chose to destroy my reputation rather than face consequences for her own poor choices. She only came clean when she was cornered and had no other option. The apology felt meaningless because it wasn't motivated by genuine remorse. It was motivated by self-preservation. She was sorry she got caught, not sorry she had falsely accused me. The experience taught me that people will sometimes sacrifice others to save themselves, that accusations can spread faster than corrections, that being innocent doesn't always protect you from the damage of being accused. I'm more careful now about who I live with, who I trust, who I let into my space. I document things more. I protect myself better. Because I learned that sometimes the people you think are friends are just waiting for an opportunity to throw you under the bus when it's convenient for them. Madison eventually dropped out of school for unrelated reasons. I have no idea what happened to her after that. I don't care. She made her choices. I survived her lie, and I moved on to build a life with people who actually have integrity. This final story comes from someone whose older brother tried to manipulate them into giving up their inheritance after their grandmother passed away, claiming family obligation and fairness. My grandmother passed away when I was 27 years old. She had been sick for a while, so her death wasn't unexpected, but it was still devastating. She had raised me for several years of my childhood when my parents were going through difficulties. We had always been close. In her will, my grandmother left me her house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a nice 3-bedroom home in a decent neighborhood. It was paid off and worth approximately $300,000. She also left some money divided among her other grandchildren, but the house came specifically to me. The will explained why. She wrote that I had lived with her during difficult years, that I had helped take care of her during her illness, that I had been the grandchild who visited most regularly, who called her every week, who made sure she wasn't lonely. She wanted me to have the house as thanks for the companionship and care I had provided. I was touched and grateful. The house meant security. It meant I could sell it and pay off my student loans, or keep it and have a place to live without rent. Either way, it was a life-changing inheritance. My older brother, Tyler, had a different reaction. He was furious. He called me the day after the will reading and demanded I split the value of the house with him. He said it wasn't fair that I got so much more than the other grandchildren. He said family wealth should be divided equally. I reminded him that Grandma had made her wishes clear. She had left the house to me specifically for specific reasons. I hadn't asked for it or manipulated her. I had simply been present in her life. Tyler said that was exactly the problem. He said I had brown-nosed our way into getting more inheritance. He said I had taken advantage of an old woman. He said I was selfish for accepting such a disproportionate share. I was stunned by his accusations. I hadn't visited Grandma and helped her because I wanted something. I had done it because I loved her, because she had been there for me when I needed her, and I wanted to be there for her in return. Tyler continued his campaign. He called our parents and told them I was being greedy. He called our cousins and tried to get them on his side. He posted vague things on social media about family greed and people who take advantage of elderly relatives. Our parents were diplomatic. They said Grandma had the right to leave her property to whoever she wanted. They said both Tyler and I should respect her wishes. But I could tell Tyler's complaints were wearing on them. Tyler escalated. He threatened to contest the will. He said he would hire a lawyer and claim that Grandma had been mentally incompetent when she wrote it. He said he would drag this through court and make it expensive and painful for everyone. I consulted with the estate lawyer. She said Tyler had no grounds to contest. Grandma had been thoroughly evaluated and was mentally competent when she made her will. She had clearly explained her reasoning. A court challenge would fail, but Tyler could make the probate process longer and more complicated. I decided to try reasoning with Tyler one more time. I invited him to coffee and tried to have an honest conversation. I asked him why he felt so entitled to half the value of the house when Grandma had specifically left it to me. He said it was about fairness. He and I were both grandchildren. We should receive equal inheritance. He said just because I had sucked up to Grandma more didn't mean I deserved more. I told him it wasn't about sucking up. It was about relationship. I had been there. He hadn't. Grandma had seen me regularly for years. She had seen Tyler maybe twice a year at holidays, and even then, he spent most of his time on his phone or finding excuses to leave early. Tyler said he had been busy with his career and his own life. He couldn't be expected to drop everything to visit an old woman who lived an hour away. I pointed out that I also had a career and a life, but I had made Grandma a priority. He said that was my choice, and I shouldn't expect to be rewarded for it. I said Grandma had rewarded me, and that was her choice, and he needed to respect it. Tyler played the family card. He said that if I really cared about family, I would share the inheritance equally. He said keeping it all for myself would damage our relationship permanently. He said I had to choose between money and family. I told him I was choosing to honor Grandma's wishes. If that damaged our relationship, that was his choice, not mine. Tyler tried involving our parents more directly. He went to them and said I was tearing the family apart. He said I was choosing greed over family harmony. He asked them to talk sense into me. My dad called me. He said that while Grandma's will was clear, maybe I should consider giving Tyler something to keep the peace. He said Tyler was genuinely hurt and felt unfairly treated. He said family relationships were more important than money. I asked my dad if he thought I should give Tyler $150,000 just because he was demanding it. When I phrased it that way, he admitted it sounded unreasonable, but he still said it might be worth it to avoid ongoing conflict. I said no. I wasn't going to be bullied into giving up what Grandma had wanted me to have. If Tyler wanted to be angry, he could be angry. But I wasn't rewarding his entitlement and manipulation. Tyler stopped talking to me. He told family members I was dead to him. He said I had shown my true colors. He said he hoped I enjoyed my blood money. Some family members sided with him. They thought I should share. They thought keeping the full value of the house was selfish. Others sided with me. They pointed out that Tyler had barely visited Grandma, had shown minimal interest in her life, and was now demanding money he hadn't earned. The family divided. Holiday gatherings became tense. Some people refused to attend if I was there. Others refused to attend if Tyler was there. My parents tried to remain neutral, which mostly meant everyone was frustrated with them. I decided to move into Grandma's house. It needed some work, but it was structurally sound. I spent weekends painting and fixing small things. I filled it with furniture and made it my home. Living there, I felt close to Grandma. I remembered the years I had lived with her as a kid. The kitchen, where she taught me to bake. The garden, where we had planted tomatoes. The living room, where we watched old movies together. Tyler saw photos of me in the house on social media. He sent me an angry message saying I was rubbing my inheritance in everyone's face. I blocked him. 6 months passed. Tyler's anger didn't fade. He was committed to his grievance. He told anyone who would listen that I had stolen his inheritance, that I had manipulated Grandma, that I was a terrible person. I stopped caring what he thought. I had tried to reason with him. I had explained Grandma's decision. I had defended myself against his accusations. Nothing had worked. He was determined to be the victim, and nothing I said or did would change that. Then something unexpected happened. Tyler had a health crisis. He was hospitalized with a serious condition that required surgery and recovery time. He couldn't work. His medical bills piled up. He asked our parents for help. They helped what they could, but they didn't have unlimited resources. Tyler swallowed his pride and called me. He said he needed to borrow money. He said he was desperate. He said I had plenty because of the house, and he needed help. I asked him if he remembered calling me greedy and selfish, if he remembered demanding I split the inheritance, if he remembered cutting me out of his life because I wouldn't give him money he felt entitled to. He said this was different. This was an emergency. Family was supposed to help family. I said family was supposed to respect each other too. He had spent months attacking me, bad-mouthing me and treating me like an enemy. Now he wanted me to rescue him financially? Tyler said I was being petty, that I was holding a grudge, that his health crisis was more important than our disagreement about Grandma's will. I told him I would lend him $5,000. Not give, lend, with a written agreement that he would pay it back over time. I wasn't going to solve all his problems, but I would help with immediate expenses. Tyler was insulted. He said he needed at least $20,000. He said $5,000 was nothing. He said if I really cared about him, I would give him what he actually needed. I said $5,000 was my offer. Take it or leave it. He took it, but he was resentful about it. He signed the loan agreement and took the money, but he made it clear he thought I should have given more. The loan was never paid back. Tyler made one payment of $200 and then stopped. When I followed up, he said he couldn't afford the payments. He said I should forgive the loan given that I had so much and he had so little. I hired a collections agency. Tyler was furious. He said I was taking him to collections over a family loan. I said he had signed a legal agreement and I was enforcing it. The family drama intensified again. People who thought I should have forgiven the loan. People who thought Tyler should honor his agreement. More divided loyalties. More tense gatherings. Eventually, Tyler paid back about half of what he owed, and I accepted that as settlement. Getting the full amount back wasn't worth the ongoing energy it took to pursue it. Tyler and I have no relationship now. We see each other at family events occasionally and are coldly polite. We don't speak otherwise. The bridge is burned. I don't regret keeping the house. I don't regret refusing to give Tyler money he demanded. I don't regret enforcing the loan agreement when he tried to avoid paying me back. Grandma left me the house because of our relationship, because I had shown up, because I had cared. Tyler wanted the benefits of that relationship without having put in any of the work. That's not how inheritance works. That's not how family works. If you want to be remembered and valued, you have to be present. You have to invest in relationships when people are alive, not just show up with your hand out after they die. Tyler learned that lesson too late. Or maybe he didn't learn it at all. Maybe he still thinks he was wronged and I was greedy. I don't know, and I don't care. I live in Grandma's house. I think of her often. I'm grateful for the gifts she gave me, both the house and the years of love and support that came before it. And I'm grateful that she made her wishes clear, so I never had to doubt that she wanted me to have this. Tyler can live with his resentment. That's his choice. I'm living in peace in a home, filled with good memories, and that's mine. And that's it for this video. Thank you for listening.